listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mature content intended for adult audiences only. Welcome to the We Read Smut podcast. I'm your host, Alesia. I am so excited about this podcast and what I truly believe it's going to do, not just for me as a host, but as romance readers. The reason that I wanted to start this podcast was because I realized that there are a lot of conversations that us bookish creators are having in our DMs that a lot of the average romance readers are actually not getting. And so I knew I wanted to create a space where those of us who love smut, whether a little bit or a lot, can come together and talk about the things that romance readers really care about. And those of us who enjoy smut tend to care about. And that is a space for celebrating diversity, celebrating stories across the board. That is why I wanted to create this podcast where we talk about all things romance. This is not going to be like your other typical romance podcasts. I want it to be a space that is free of reviews, but shares conversations with some of your favorite authors, maybe highlights some new authors that you've never heard of. I'll also be having conversations with some of my favorite bookstagrammers and those who are having these really deep conversations but are giving so much to the bookish community. We'll have topics like how to create a weekend reading retreat or how to read more diverse Latinx books with tons of recommendations in between. The goal is to create a safe and inclusive space where we can discuss smut and all things romance without shame and celebrate the power of those diverse love stories. I am a woman of color. I am Afro-Latina. And so reading stories about people who have had similar life experiences to me or who look like me and promoting those stories is so important. And I also understand how important it is to showcase the stories of those who don't look like me or do not have my lived experience. And so that is why I wanted to bring everybody together, these bookish creators, these authors who have different experiences. And so it's not just me and it's not just reviews about my favorite books. It is going to be an eclectic variety of topics, and I know that you're going to enjoy this. Let me tell you a little bit about my reading journey. In all of our co-hosted episodes with other content creators, I ask them the question of, what did your adult reading journey look like? And so I wanted to share my own with you today. I was not always a voracious adult reader. I started my reading journey when I was young, loved reading books, loved writing stories, loved doing all of that stuff. I can even think of stories that I wrote in elementary school and high school and just always wanting to either write or escape the world that I was in. I come from a very dysfunctional family, and reading was my escape. It was my way to get outside of my lived experience. And I remember hiding under the covers with a flashlight or with a nightlight and just trying to get through the books, reading 500-page books in a weekend, all of those experiences as I was growing up. And then when I got to college, I was reading college books and textbooks and all of that stuff. Just really didn't have a lot of time to read for enjoyment and found myself reading some erotica, but not a lot of it. And it was mostly just on websites that sold toys. So that was always very interesting to remember those moments in college when that was my fun reading. And then when I became a mom, I still was working on my bachelor's degree. So I was still working on reading a lot of textbooks and didn't have a lot of time to just read books and was reading books to my kid. Then I became a mom a second time, had finished my degree, and thought, I should read for self-development because I'm an adult now and I'm a mom now and I have to read all these things. That was a load of trash. And I realized that I could not get through a self-development book to save my life. It was very difficult to read them. I felt like I just kept pushing myself to read these books that I could not and did not want to read. Then I want to say it was 2019, I realized that I wanted to read more erotica. I was having some issues with my libido after my second child and wanted to spice things up. And I remembered that reading erotica had helped. And so I tried it and I loved it. I had so much fun reading those books. And it kind of opened up this world of romance reading again to me. I remember getting through 20 books between November and December and being like, wow, that was a lot of fun. I'm going to keep reading. And then I just kind of blew through a bunch of books in 2020. I believe I read 250 books that year. It was wild. But I remember sharing with friends that I'm reading these books and I'm really enjoying it. And I like to read smut. And I'm not ashamed to say that. And I'm not ashamed to say that I like my books with open doors spice. And also I'm growing as a person more than I ever would from a self-development book. So the friends that I shared that experience with were amazed and they started reading as well. And most of them still read today. So sometimes I'll reach out and say, hey, what are you reading? And we'll swap ideas or recommendations. And really just that adventure of getting back into reading as an adult has been so impactful. And then in 2021, I want to say, my friend Nicole and I started We Read Smut as a bookstagram. We had both been wanting to start a bookstagram, but didn't want to do it alone because realized it was so much work. And then everything kind of just progressed from there. I knew that I wanted to launch a podcast around reading. I knew that I wanted to create something that wasn't really out there just yet, but held off. And so now here we are. I'm finally launching the podcast that I wanted to. I have been a podcaster since 2018. So this is not my first podcast. It's not new to me. And so I hope I can bring that experience as an interviewer, but also as a podcaster to the table and hopefully create something that romance readers enjoy, doesn't bother your ears too much, and is high quality. Now, here on the podcast, we believe that smut, while it can be titillating, is also impactful, that it is a powerful tool to explore your sexuality, to explore intimacy and consent, to explore women's pleasure, to explore relationships that are healthy. And that is what I want to showcase with this podcast. There are all of these different avenues that we can grow as humans via romance, via smut. And I think that it can be a really impactful thing. I also think that it is crucial that we are sharing stories that show the diversity of our world, that are inclusive for sexuality, ethnicity, body types, abilities, and other identities. I think that it's really important that, like I said at the beginning, we're showcasing these stories that are not just our own lived experiences, but are also lived experiences of those that are marginalized or are different than our own. Throughout the podcast, I will also be having just a few solo episodes sharing things that I'm doing, what I'm finding in romance, what I'm enjoying, what I'm not. Some of it's going to be a little more basic educational stuff, like what are tropes and defining all of the tropes, getting nitty gritty into maybe some ideas around how to get through a book slump and things like that. But I think it's going to be really helpful for you to hear not just from our incredible authors and co-hosts, but also from me as someone who loves to read romance as well. I would encourage you to like, subscribe, leave a review, share your thoughts, recommend this podcast to a friend, and I cannot wait for you to hear more of these incredible episodes with my lovely guests and co-hosts. If you would like to join in on the conversation, you can go to We Read Smut on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode.